Okay, and welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, July 27th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories right here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com, and here are some of the news stories from the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. U.S. Energy Secretary Stephen Chu says there are more than $2 million in federal funding will be awarded for tribal energy projects in Alaska. Federal officials say the projects will receive $2.3 million over 2 years. Altogether, $6.3 million will be awarded nationwide for 31 tribal energy projects. Officials say the projects are geared for advanced, clean, and efficient energy in communities. Alaska recipients include the Sea Lion Corporation in Hooper Bay, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium for work in Sealawik, the Tlingit-Haida Regional Housing Authority, and the Yukon River Intertribal Watershed Council. Two of three people accused of embezzling $135,000 from the Social Services Department of the Wind River Reservation have been found guilty. The organization's payroll clerk, Amanda Ortez, was convicted last week in Federal District Court of embezzling and converting federal funds. Executive Director George Moss pled guilty to the embezzling charge on June 30th. Both are now waiting to hear their sentence, according to KTAK-FM. Melody St. Clair, the third defendant, will be retried after a mistrial was declared because the defense counsel had previously represented a government witness. A Cass County, Minnesota grand jury has upgraded the charges against a Cass Lake man accused in the killing of his ex-girlfriend to first-degree premeditated murder. County prosecutors announced the new charges last week against 27-year-old Ross Z. Littlewolf. He had previously been charged with second-degree murder, but because a conviction for first-degree premeditated murder carries a mandatory life sentence without parole, it can only be charged by a grand jury. Prosecutors allege Littlewolf fired a shotgun blast through a sliding glass door to enter the Cass Lake home of 22-year-old Candace Blaine Dunn and then shot her in the head on June 26. Dunn was sharing the room with her two young children at the time. Janie Hipp, senior advisor to Secretary Valsack for Tribal Relations, today reminded Native American farmers and ranchers that the period to file a claim in the Keepseagle class action settlement has opened. Now that the claims process is open, Native American farmers and ranchers who believe they are entitled to funds under the Keepseagle settlement must file a claim within 180 days in order to have a chance to receive a cash payment or loan forgiveness, said Ms. Hipp. Tribal leaders may want to consider advising tribal members of the requirement to obtain and submit a completed claims package if they wish to participate in the Keepseagle claims process. Keepseagle vs. Valsack was a lawsuit alleging that the USDA discriminated against Native American farmers and ranchers in a way it operated its farm loan programs. The lawsuit was settled last year, and the settlement has been approved by the court. The filing period opened June 29th and continues for 180 days until December 27th, 2011. Unity Journalists of Color, Inc., an alliance of the Native American Journalists Association, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and the Asian American Journalists Association, deplores the ruling by an Ecuadorian judge to sentence the editors, the owners, and the former columnists of the daily El Universo of Guayaquil to 3 years in prison and fines totaling $40 million in U.S. dollars in a libel suit filed by presidential Rafael Correa of Ecuador. President Correa filed the lawsuit on March 21st, 2011, prompted by a column by then El Universo columnist Emilio Palacio in February 6. The column, entitled No to Lies, strongly criticized the president's response to a mutiny by police officers on September 30th, 2010. While the column was harsh, jailing a journalist for expressing his opinion and ordering the newspaper to pay a multi-million-dollar fine goes against legal principles established by the Inter-America Court of Human Rights, of which Ecuador is a member of the Organization of American States and is obliged to abide by. Once again, Unity, journalist of color, wishes to express its concerns about these actions, which they feel will have a harmful effect on freedom of expression in Ecuador and result in self-censorship. It took nearly 2 years of litigation to produce documents detailing how one of the last authentic Indian traders was railroaded by a corrupt investigation and how the Interior Inspector General, or the IG, covered up its own investigation of the mess. The IG investigation found major lapses of oversight and professionalism in the National Park Service law enforcement program that have yet to be addressed, according to public employees for environmental responsibility. The Inspector General report of investigation was completed and turned over to the National Park Service in January 2008, but sat in limbo for a year and a half waiting for a National Park Service response. Even then, the Inspector General's report never published its own report, which concluded that the original National Park Service investigation into Billy Malone, the resident trader at Hubbell Trading Post National Historic Site in Granado, Arizona, was bad enough to prompt the Inspector General to ask the U.S. Attorney to consider criminal prosecution of the National Park Service agent Clyde Yee for using false information to secure search warrants and illegally seizing Malone's property. Prosecution against Yee was ultimately declined so that the National Park Service could pursue, quote, administrative remedies, unquote. Days after it was postponed because of a state lawmaker's death, a meeting between North Dakota and the NCAA officials to discuss the University of North Dakota's Fighting Sioux nickname has been rescheduled for August 12th. The meeting, to be held at the association's headquarters in Indianapolis, Indiana, is set 3 days before the NCAA intends to impose sanctions on UND for the continued use of the nickname and a logo that features the profile of an American Indian warrior. The NCAA considers them offensive to American Indians, but the North Dakota legislature earlier this year approved a law that required UND to keep both indefinitely. Grant Shaft, president of North Dakota's Board of Higher Education, confirmed the new meeting date to the Associated Press this last Friday. The university, as part of an October 2007 settlement of a lawsuit against the NCAA, agreed to drop the nickname and logo by August 15, 2011. The new pro-nickname law, which was signed by Governor Jack Dalrymple in March of this year and takes effect August 1st, prevents UND from meeting that deadline. And that is going to be the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to say miigwech for showing up, so miigwech!